Hello, I'm Jerry Middleton, and today we're going to talk timeouts. Timeouts is one of the more confusing things of pro basketball if you're not used to it. So before we get into the exact mandatory timeouts, when they happen, who gets charged, and all that, let's go over a couple other things first. Where do we put the ball in play on a timeout? Well, that's a great question. So let's say, for instance, the ball is here and we have a timeout call. Well, we're thinking, from what we're used to, the ball would go here. That is not true. The ball will go here, straight across to the nearest sideline is where we're going to put the ball in play. So anytime we'd ever put the ball in play following a timeout would be if the offense calls timeout, the new offense calls timeout after a made bucket, would go here and they can run it unless they're going to advance the basketball, which will happen in the last 2 minutes of the fourth period or any overtime. But for right now, it's going to go across. So the ball's in play, it's just going to go across. If the ball is here, it's just going to go like this. If the ball is here, it's going to go like this. Pretty simple. We're just going to go straight across. Now, let's talk about the backcourt real quick. The offense calls a timeout in the backcourt after the ball's been put in play. It's still going to go to the nearest sideline. However, the kicker to this is our magic number on the shot clock is still going to be 15. It becomes a combined count in the backcourt. So if you're at a 4 count, then when you bring it in, it's going to be another 4 count. So 15 is what we're looking for on the shot clock. We want to base all of our backcourt violations on the 8-second count on the shot clock. All right, so there's no visible count. It's all on the shot clock. Remember that. All right, so let's get into now. Hopefully everybody's got this. Sideline. Just think sideline, 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 and you'll be right 99% of the time. So, if you have any questions, email me, jmiddleton@nws.k12.in.us, and I'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions. So, with that being said, we no longer need my fabulous artwork. If you notice, it's getting better. At this point, we don't need it. We'll come back to it when we get to the last 2 minutes of the fourth. Okay, so the first period of play, we have mandatories, and use the word mandatory, not media, at 6:59 and 2:59 or below. The first dead ball. Now, a dead ball cannot be a delayed game warning. It cannot be for a scoring of a goal, i.e. goaltending, or basket interference by the defense. It can't be anything like that. It needs to be a foul, a travel, the ball thrown out of bounds, some sort of violation other than scoring of a basket. So that should get you that figured out. So if all is right in the world, at 6:59, let's say the ball goes out of bounds at 6:50, we're going to have a mandatory timeout and it's going to get charged to the home team. And then below 2:59, say the ball goes out of bounds at 2 minutes, then we're going to charge to the visitor. Now both teams start the game with 7 timeouts. And these do reduce this number. So this is in a perfect world that this is the way it's happening. Now, could we have a called timeout at, say, 11 minutes by the home team? Yes. Is that charged as the first mandatory as far as for television commercials and the dance teams that come out or giveaways? Yes, that is our first mandatory of the period. Even though it was called, even though it was above that. Could we have a second timeout, and this has happened, at 10:30 by the home team? Absolutely. And this would be considered our second mandatory. So basically at that point we're going to play 10 minutes and 30 seconds of basketball without a timeout that we're going to call as the officials as a mandatory timeout. Could the visitors call a timeout in here? Yes, they can. And you will hope that they do. But if it doesn't happen, then our timeout situations, we're going to put up here the home team now has 5 remaining, and the visitors have 7. So there's our first period done. Let's move to the second period. And let's say the second period goes as planned, and we have a timeout. Ball goes out of bounds at 6:50. So that gets charged to the home team no matter what, unless the visitors call it. Home team always gets charged the first one unless the visitors call it prior to that. And then at, let's say, 2:40, the visitors call a timeout. Now both of our mandatories are done. So our timeouts are now 4 and 6. So let's move to the third period of play. So in the third period, the home team is having problems. They call a timeout at 9:30. Home team calls. Then we go on, and so it makes our next timeout below 2:59, which should be charged to the visitors. So at 2 minutes, ball goes out of bounds, and we're charging to the visitors. So now after 3 periods of play, our timeout situations are 3 and 5. Things looking pretty good so far. Now, so the third period is over, and we're getting ready to start the fourth. Well, home team's good. They got 3 timeouts left. The visiting team's got 5 timeouts left. Uh-oh, we got a problem. You can only carry a maximum of 4 timeouts into the fourth period. So, we need to inform our scorekeeper, our clock operator, that the visitors now have only 4 timeouts. And I hope this video gets to the coaches so that they see this, so that they know that they're going to lose a timeout if they have more than 4 heading into that. So now let's do this. Let's say, okay, so we're just playing in the fourth quarter now. We've got our timeouts for 3 and 4. 6:59 and 2:59 will be our timeouts, our mandatories. And so at 5:30, the home team gets a timeout. Goes out of bounds, mandatory goes to them. All right, so that's going to drop them down to 2 timeouts. Now, so now the visitors, the ball, we get down to the let's call it the 2:25 mark, goes out of bounds, and we're going to charge it to the visitors, okay? Now, the maximum timeouts that we could have under 3 minutes for either team would be 3. But we're not changing this to 3 once it hits 3 minutes. We have to wait for the mandatory or a called timeout by either team. So let's say that we're just in this scenario right here. Okay, this is good. So now the visitors just lost a timeout because we went below 3, and they just got charged a timeout because it was a mandatory charge to them. So now they have 2 timeouts. Both teams have 2 timeouts at this point. So now we're going to move to the last 2 minutes of the game. Now you can advance the basketball once we have a timeout below that. So I'm going to go back to my little drawing here. And we're just going to have a small court. So let's say that, for instance, the ball was rebounded in the paint, and one of the teams is going to call a timeout, or not one of them, but the offensive team is going to call a timeout. Let's say it's the visitors. So the visitors call a timeout, okay, which is going to drop them down to 1, and we're below 2 minutes, so they can advance the basketball. Now, where can they advance the basketball to? Good question. They can advance the basketball because the rebound happens in the paint. They can decide either side of the court at the 28-foot mark at the other end of the floor that's where they want to inbound the ball. So they have a choice. After a made bucket and a team calls a timeout in the last 2 minutes, they have a choice of which side it goes on. However, if a ball goes out of bounds here or on the sideline and they call a timeout, their only choice is here. You have to go up the sideline that the ball went out of bounds on. Okay? Once we get outside the paint, it's determined where they're going. Now, so let's say we have that timeout. We don't go over to the coaches like you do in college. Run over to them and say, where are you going with the ball and play? And you let the other team know. We don't do that here. We're going to set the ball, if this is the arc, we're going to set the ball here. Lets everybody know that the ball can be advanced. We're not saying what side. We're just saying that the ball can be advanced. When they break the huddle, then we'll find out where they want the ball put in play. Do they want it put in play back where it went out of bounds, which they most certainly can do, or do they want to put it in play on this side here? Or if it's after made bucket, which side they want to put it in. All right? So that's how that would work. So let's get back to our last 2 minutes again. So each team can advance the ball 2 times in the last 2 minutes. If happens. If they are coming up the floor with the ball and call timeout and they want to advance, they can't do it because they've been attacking to the basket. So can they call second timeout to advance it? Absolutely. They can burn the second timeout to advance the basketball. And will those run one after the other? Absolutely, they run one after the other. So, let's say for instance here that the visitors have 3 timeouts, and going into the last 3 minutes, and the clock runs down to 1:50, and the ball goes out of bounds, and it belongs to the visitors, and we haven't had our last mandatory yet, so a mandatory is called and they get charged for it. Can they advance the basketball in that scenario? The answer to that is absolutely. I don't agree with it, but absolutely they could. And we can flip-flop this around. If it was the home team that was the mandatory was getting ready to get charged to and they had 3, can they advance it? Yes. So that can happen, so don't let that one sneak up on you. And the whole reason that they could do that is because we never had that mandatory at below 2:59 or below until we were below the 2 minutes, and that's what allows that to happen. So overtime, let's talk overtime real quick. Remember this, 5, 4, 2. Overtimes were 5 minutes. We're going to shoot on the 4th foul. And 2 timeouts. And the same thing, they cannot advance the basketball until the last 2 minutes of the game, or the overtime I should say, and there's no mandatory timeouts. So you play until they start calling timeouts. So to wrap this up is this. Keep track of the timeouts in your head. In a perfect world, we're going into the 4th quarter with 4 each. That makes it nice and easy. And then after the mandatories, in a perfect world, you'll be down to 3 each, heading into the last 3 minutes of the game. If a team calls a timeout at, let's say, 3:20, and that's our last mandatory that we need to have, then when that clock hits 3 minutes, both teams drop down to 2 timeouts, so someone's going to lose one unless they call it. And again, coaches, I hope you get to watch this so that you understand that these timeouts will automatically fall off. Because last year we had a lot of people not understand that they're losing timeouts. And if you have questions about it, feel free to email me. I'll be more than happy to answer your questions on these timeouts. This has just been a rough, quick go-through. So if you have questions about it, shoot me an email. Appreciate it. Have a good day.